Good afternoon. Now is the time set for the board meeting of the Arizona State Schools for the Deaf and the Blind. We are going to begin with our call to order, but before we do that, I just wanted to mention we have 3 board members who have not yet been appointed or reappointed to the board. We are waiting on those.
Excuse me, this is Shelley's interpreter. We can't hear you.
Okay, I will. Is this a better volume for you?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
thank you. We are proceeding under ARS 38295 that allows board members to proceed in their positions until appointments or reappointments are made. We will begin with agenda item 1.01, call to order, and we'll need the roll call. Suke, are you on the phone?
I am, but I asked Ms. Lipsett to do that for me since I'll be traveling.
Okay, I can do it. Linda Bove. Lynn Davidson.
Here.
Michael Gordon.
Here.
Shelley Herbold.
Here.
Dean Howard. Suke Kneifel.
Here.
Mike Manley.
Here.
David Nigro here. Mark Sims.
Here.
Thank you. All right, we have a quorum. I was notified before the meeting that one of the presenters has to go to another ASDB event later today, so we're going to move up item 7.01. That's going to be the information item, introduction and possible discussion of policies from Maria Murphy.
Good afternoon, Board President Nigro, members of the board, Superintendent Reichman, Assistant Superintendent Rex. Thank you for accommodating my event schedule. At this time, you have the red lines of the initial proposals of revisions for IKAB, JFABC, and EHB for discussion. They were posted to, well, first, let me not get ahead of myself. I did present them to the board policy subcommittee, and questions were answered. A few minor changes were made, and they were posted on the agency website. No comments were received, and that's all I have at this time.
Thank you. Do any members of the board have any comments on any of these items? Hearing none, we'll resume the regular scheduled agenda. We're going to start with 1.02, call to the public. Call to the public on agendized items. As is typical, each speaker will have 3 minutes. We have received one request from Danny Lawrence. Is she here today? Okay. So again, 3 minutes, and it'll begin when you start speaking.
Appreciate it. Thank you, board members, ASDB administration, President Nigro, for the opportunity to speak on item 1.05, the agency profile report. I'm here tonight to pose a big ask of you as a board. As you approach your strategic planning sessions, could we please make this the year where we create some programs for the visually impaired community at ASDB? Reading over this agency profile report, I was particularly impacted by the 2-page description of services offered to students in the deaf and hard of hearing community, while similarly the blind and visual impairment community got 1 true paragraph of a description of their minimal services. There are no Braille classes for parents offered, but ASL classes are offered for families. There is no blind mentor program, but there is a deaf mentor program that was truly the highlight of this organization last year. In 6 years of dealing with ASDB, I have encountered no one who is blind or visually impaired working here. Camp LEAP sounds like an amazing opportunity for the deaf and hard of hearing community to connect with vocational rehab and help high school students plan for the future. Is there some reason that ASDB is not offering that for high school planning for blind and visually impaired children? Is their job readiness any less important? Recently, I heard there's a low vision specialist now working for ASDB. Thank you for that, but it's one individual to travel the entire state. The agency report there spends ample time stating that ASDB supplies APH literature materials, and honestly, I really feel like that's the expectation of an organization that serves blind and visually impaired students. There's nothing in this report for the blind community here that comes anywhere close to the level of services being rendered for the deaf community within ASDB. If as board members in strategic plan, you cannot bring yourself to support some new program development, please help advocate for the separation of these two populations so all the students at ASDB get their needs met. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, having no other requests, we will move on to item 1.03, information item executive team reports.
Yes, this is Superintendent Reichman speaking. You all have the written reports from the executive team, so if you have any questions, now is the time to ask.
Hearing none. Is that correct? Yeah. Hearing none, we will move on to 1.04, information item assistant superintendent report, Assistant Superintendent Rex.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Board. President Nigro. You have my report, but I also have some information as well as a PowerPoint to share with you this afternoon. With the Phoenix State School for the Deaf resignation of Principal Courtney Fritz, I want to give you an update. We all know that the classroom teacher is one of the most visible people in our students' life at school, but it is truly the principal that is responsible for ensuring high quality education for the students that go to the school. So we have been developing a timeline and working on what we need to see to hopefully advertise to get the best possible candidate to replace Ms. Fritz. We know that great principals take responsibility for the school's success. We know that great principals lead teaching and learning. We know that great principals hire and develop but retain excellent teachers. And we know that great principals build a strong sense of community. And those are some pretty big shoes to fill at the PDSD campus. But we currently are working on a timeline where we are working on the PDQ, which is what's going to help us with our advertising, which will be going out at the end of this month. We will be developing an interview committee. We will be working with staff to find out what type of needs they have for our leadership. We will be focusing questions with the PDSD staff on what their leadership expectations are. We will have a committee, and we will be asking for one of you board members to volunteer to serve on the hiring of our principal. We look forward to creating that checklist, advertising that position, screening applicants, and then bringing highly qualified applicants to you as part of the interview process. In March, we are looking to conduct interviews for the principal position, and hopefully bringing a recommendation to the superintendent or final candidates for another round of questions, and bringing to you in April or May approval of the principal position so that person can come on as soon as possible. Courtney Fritz will be here till the end of June, and we want to give those two individuals and that leadership as much transition time as possible. So I wanted to give you an update on that. Also, there's been a request at our last meeting to give an update on our distance itinerant service program. We are currently serving 62 students in 19 districts across the state in complete distance as well as a blended model. We anticipate an additional 52 students and 18 more school districts coming on. We will be at almost a year since we started this process, and we look forward to having full implementation July 1. And when I say full implementation, every cooperative has students that they have determined through the IEP process are eligible or good candidates to be served in this model. Also, the Braille Curriculum Committee met in November, and the Braille Curriculum Committee is creating a guidance document that will assist IEP teams, which includes parents and TVIs, among others, on the selection of what the appropriate Braille curriculum will be for that student. The guidance will set forth data to be collected and will guide analysis of that data to lead a recommended Braille curriculum. Being a highly individualized undertaking, input from the IEP team will weigh heavily in making these decisions, as it is in the best interest of the student. However, the guidance document will ensure that the appropriate data is being collected and reviewed for each and every student, so the agency may achieve uniformity in this process, but not necessarily the outcome. Moving from committee, the draft is going to be distributed to teachers agency-wide and be getting solicitation for their feedback, and the final draft will be completed by March 1st. In addition, training on Braille instructional materials and implementation of the guidance documents will be occurring in the spring as well as this summer of 2020. Dates and locations for those trainings are still to be determined. And now if I can have you go look at the first slide, if we can go back to the first slide on the PowerPoint. I'd like to move into the first slide of my presentation, that is the Arizona State flag with the title of Arizona State Schools for the Deaf and Blind, Regional Cooperative Redesign, the next 18 months. What I hope to share with you today is a reiteration of why we are doing our redesign, what we are doing now and what we will be phasing in, where we are with our distance itinerant services, who will be helping us along the way, and how we will get to the target goal of full implementation by July 2021. Next slide. Slide 2 of this Regional Cooperative Redesign PowerPoint basically shows a quote from Walt Disney that states, "Keep moving forward." It also depicts pictures of the Disneyland Main Street Electric Parade with a shot of a castle in the background and a large dragon moving characters with thousands of lights. I used this as my example of the quote that I shared at the last board meeting. The quote was by William Pollard, and it said, "Learning and innovating go hand in hand. The arrogance of success is to think that what you did yesterday will be sufficient for tomorrow." And I used the Disneyland Main Street Electrical Parade as a personal reference. In 1972, the Disneyland Mainland Parade debuted. And it was lights, and it was music, and it was characters, and they had Cinderella, and at the very end they had a large American flag. And the reason I know this is because my parents took me to Disneyland. And I was well past my bedtime, and I sat on my dad's shoulders, and it had been a great day at Disneyland, but my takeaway was that visual parade, and that encapsulated what Disney was trying to have everyone leave the park with that feeling of magic. And they succeeded for many, many years. So fast forward to 1984, back in the 80s, everybody spent their senior trip going to Disneyland, and they put hundreds of graduating 12th graders at Disneyland, and you did the rides, and at the end, along came the parade. As an older person, I saw that parade, and I still left with that same sense of magic. The music might have changed, they might have added some characters, but my feeling was the same. So Disneyland nailed it. Now, fast forward to 1990. My daughter won a trip to Disneyland, and we all got an all-expense-paid trip to Disneyland. And I loved all the rides, and I loved sharing that, but I could not wait to share with her the light parade. That, to me, encapsulated that magical feeling of Disneyland. And Disneyland replicated this at their Disney World, at their Paris Disneyland, their Tokyo Disneyland. It was part of how they had their stakeholders walk away feeling that sense of magic. But poor attendance, new technologies, new rides in the park competed for the parade's goal with the stakeholders that were using the park. The parade ended August of 2019, and although I was sad because I had a great connection to it, Disneyland had to keep moving forward and had to figure out a different way of leaving people with that magical feeling. So as we move into our redesign and we look at Jim Collins and his book Good to Great, Jim Collins says that good is the enemy of great, and that is the key reason why so little becomes truly great. We don't have great schools principally because we have a lot of good schools. We don't have great government principally because we have a good government. Few people attain great lives in part because they have good lives. It's easy to settle for good. In our redesign process, we no longer want to settle. We want to take what we have. We have some fantastic things, and we want to make sure they are replicated and they are available to all students statewide. Next slide. My next slide depicts a group of triangles that are all kind of overlapping each other. And I put that graphic in there because I want people that are listening and out there working hard to understand that currently we have a lot of initiatives, a lot of programs that we are looking at. Our board is developing dates to work on a strategic plan for 2020. For the past 2 years, stakeholders from across the agency have met and been developing operating principles, working agreements on how we as an agency will work with each other, as well as our external stakeholders. We had an advanced ed accreditation where our agency had a review that recommended that we as an organization continue to seek ways to gather, analyze, and use data to improve our student learning, as well as the delivery of our programs and services. It also recommended that we use digital resources in teaching, learning, and operations, and to improve professional practice and organizational effectiveness, as well as to support learning and program delivery. So why would we commit to redesigning the co-ops in the midst of all these other efforts? And they're in various stages of implementation. Because we as co-ops need to seek consistency. We as the co-ops need to have sustainability. We need to have quality assurances across the state that ensure students are receiving what they need in a consistent manner. Change is coming like the Disneyland Electric Parade, and we can manage our change, or the change is just going to happen. We need to focus on a vision and a philosophy to continue to offer what people will need to be successful in our co-ops. Next slide. Our next slide focuses with some red arrows that are crooked, but they're all pointing in the same direction. And the reason is our why. Opportunity came knocking. We have a director that has retired and will be finishing out this year. We have an interim director that will be finishing out their year. So with 2 people retiring and the redesign as part of our process, we have changes in administration anyways, and we have been working this year to develop a clear understanding of what services are currently being provided in each co-op, and we have found that there are some areas of programming and delivery of services that are fantastic. We also found that we need to find ways of sharing this information and this support. We are focusing on quality assurances in our co-ops. We are looking currently at our audiologists. We are looking at IEP goal writing, educational interpreters, how we offer limited and full services to the districts that we partner with, what type of trainings we're giving to our schools and our districts, and what kind of ongoing PD for assistive technology needs to be completed so everyone has the same information. Our current cooperative model is not sustainable. Some of our co-ops have declining enrollment. Some of our co-ops have increasing enrollment. And if we have a good plan, we can make the best use of our resources, which is our teachers, to meet those needs statewide. We as a agency need to ensure the same quality instruction, no matter how it is delivered statewide, and ensuring those quality assurances in all the co-ops will support our goal and our arrows all pointing in the same direction. Like Disneyland's Main Street Electric Parade, with the new technology moving them off, we have resources, we have technology, and we need to ensure that we are using it to its best ability and the capacity to meet the students' needs and manage our change. Next slide. We have a vision statement that reads, a united statewide program providing itinerant services, promoting quality assurance, and ensuring all students have access to learning in their districts and schools, using statewide resources to guarantee consistent delivery of research-based strategies and highly qualified staff. That is our why, that is our vision, and every time we look at a quality assurance, every time we try to think of ways to innovate and make our cooperatives better, we are using that vision statement as a tool. Next slide. What we know at this point in time is we have a target date of July 1, 2021 for full implementation. We have used enrollment data, and we've determined the decline in rural areas and the increase in metro areas. Making sure that we are hiring teachers of the deaf and TVIs that are highly qualified is an ongoing challenge. We have retirements that are creating a need for us to be able to serve the current districts that we have agreements with, but we now have districts that never had an agreement with us that want to partner with us because the people that they had in their own personalized programs are also retiring. So the need is increasing, and the pool is being more and more difficult to find the highly qualified people that we need. We have to have people that can reach all over the state and serve students. And that's where we kind of have been leaning in to use our itinerant remote model. We know that kids graduate, we know they move in and out of our districts, but the focus of our redesign will use data to ensure that we are redirecting the support throughout the co-ops and using our resources and delivering the training to give the highly skilled teachers what they're going to need to serve students statewide. Next slide. We have phase 1, which is rolling out. Phase 1 includes the Eastern Highlands Co-op, the North Central Co-op, and the Southwest Cooperative. Using enrollment information, succession planning for the 2 directors that are leaving, and unifying the skills of the administrative assistants at EHR, NCR, and SWR, it was determined that Michelle Lucci will now be the director for those 3 co-ops and continue serving the distance itinerant program. Our staff was notified last week about that redesign update. We try to give updates as soon as we have concrete information to push it out to our stakeholders, our internal stakeholders. Tomorrow, NCR, EHR, and SWR admins will be meeting and doing a work study session and preparing for the 2020 school year. We are taking these admins, we're looking at what they are currently doing, and we are redistributing their work and ensuring that we will have a smooth transition when July and August rolls around. We are needing to focus on the needs assessment, and we are looking at innovations that are established by our staff. We have staff members that are already coming and saying, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And these are the teachers that are actually doing the work, and they are coming up with good ideas. And we are listening, because as part of this redesign, we're not sure exactly where it is going. We know why it is going, but we want them to be a part of that change and be able to manage the change along with us. Currently, SER, the Southeast region and Desert Valley region, they will be served by their same co-op director, but they will be taking on some of the heavy lifting of the quality assurance pieces and going through nugget by nugget and looking at how we do business in each co-op and finding more systematic ways to be sharing resources and working together. Next slide. Phase 2 is what we are currently working on. We are taking cost savings from the 2 cooperative directors that are leaving, and we are redistributing that into the hiring of a new director of itinerant services, where the focus of that position will be on the redesign of the cooperatives. That is first and foremost this person's job, working with the co-ops and developing our statewide itinerant services. As of today, when the position closed, we had 33 applications, internal as well as external candidates. The staff of the co-op were given that redesign information. The staff in the co-ops understand that there is a position that is being posted. We are currently developing an interview committee, and I am at this time going to hopefully put one of you on the spot and ask for one board member that would be willing to do this hiring process, and we are looking at February 5th and 7th for setting interviews.
This is Lynn Davison. I would like to be on that committee.
Thank you. We are
Thank you.
trying, we have a lot of interesting candidates, and we have a deep pool from within, but also without. So we are looking to make sure we have a lot of the aspects of the agency being represented, and we certainly welcome you coming on board. We have representation from the deaf and blind directors. We will have representation from the ODD team, which will be helping with the transition for professional development. We are looking for some statewide special education directors who are our external stakeholders. So that committee is evolving, and thank you for putting a piece of that puzzle together. The ultimate goal is to bring you a candidate at the March board meeting to accept. Next slide. Phase 3, once we have that right person in that position, they will begin a 100-day plan as the Director of Itinerant Services, and they will be focusing on the evaluation of the effectiveness of the current model and the plan that we are moving into place on that consolidation. They will be working with the NCR, EHR, SWR teams to start getting successful transition there, as well as monitoring the quality assurances that are currently being handled by DVR and SER. We have various groups within the cooperatives that are going to be tapped as resources because they have a lot of information and ideas and bring their own leadership and expertise to this process. We are looking forward to moving into an innovative phase where we have statewide itinerant services being reviewed and becoming available and logistically creative. I'm not sure what that looks like, and I look forward to having that person come on and help steer that part of the ship. Next slide. What we don't know right now, we don't know the long-term demographics of our populations, but what we do know is there is a committee working on the best practices for projecting enrollment, and that will help support in our decision-making. What we don't know is the evolution of this transition for the redesign. We are working on the structure of the admins, on their roles and responsibilities in the 3 combining co-ops. We have control over that. We know exactly where we are going with that. But once this new person comes on, we will have to deal with whatever roadblocks lie ahead. We don't know what kind of leader will come into that position. Is it going to be an internal stakeholder, and then we'll have to refigure out the configuration of the current co-ops as they stand? Will it be an external stakeholder that needs to get up to speed? We're looking at maybe like a 100-day plan, what we did with, I think Annette did a 100-day plan. I think other directors that have come on, there's some set transition pieces that we will definitely support them with. We have the hiring process underway. Once we find that person, we will know a little bit more of how that will be rolling out. Next slide. What we are working right now is the hiring process. We have our pilot itinerant remote services that will be, we are right on target to start that July 1. We have staff to serve students at this time. We have more staff that are interested in the blended model and wanting to explore serving students in a blended model. We have a comprehensive agency communication plan that we will continue to lean on to help make sure the messaging is going out to our stakeholders. We are still working on helping our internal people understand what we're doing, but we have a lot of districts that we need to start explaining how we're going to be doing business next year. And so that heavy lifting is beginning now as well. Next slide. My final picture is the ASDB logo, but it's also the 3 arrows that move in a continuous circle. And continuous improvement is something that we have focused on since I came here in 2016. As of February 1st, I will have been at ASDB 4 years, and I continue to give my commitment to collaborate on this redesign process. I want to ensure that we will continue to use a decision-making model and act as we make these heavier decisions that are going to impact a lot of people. The redesign will be part of the current cooperative director's SMART goals next year. This will be a major focus for them. And I believe the best leadership that we have is transformational, and the redesign of these co-ops is going to be an opportunity for everyone in all levels of our leadership in our agency to truly give input and support creating a statewide itinerant model. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rex. Any of the board members have any comments on her presentation? Thank you. This is going to be a major structural change, but I think in the last year or so, I think our opportunities for improvement are on the consistency and quality assurance pieces of the cooperatives, and I think this is going to go a long way to address some of those so that we can ensure that every student in the state has access to the same high-quality services. All right, the next agenda item is item 1.05, information and discussion items, superintendent's report and executive session pursuant to ARS 38431.03A1. Superintendent Reichman.
Good afternoon, President Nigro, members of the board, Assistant Superintendent Rex, and ASDB community. Welcome to our January 23rd, 2020 board meeting. As you've already seen and heard, a lot of exciting things are happening throughout the agency, and there's a lot more going on. My presentation will be split into 2 parts. One is the public presentation, where I give you sort of the state of the agency. That is a retrospective of 2019, what we've done in the last year. Then the second part, we will all go into an executive session to talk about the intent to offer contracts to our leadership team. That is the executive directors, the directors, and the principals. And then we have a list of teachers that we want to offer contracts for the next school year for 2020 to 2021. So this part here is 2-part, okay? So I'm going to start with the state of the agency report. If you recall, about 2 years ago, I shared a story with you about the Chinese bamboo tree, right? I know you've heard this multiple times, but as I was preparing for the retrospective of 2019, it really brought me back to that story. If you remember, the story itself is that it took 5 years of committed, dedicated, every day providing water and fertilizing and making sure there was enough sunshine for the bamboo tree to even show a sprout. 5 years before we had a little sprout above ground. And the reason it took 5 years for that little sprout to show up was because it really needed a very strong, extensive root system to support the growth of 80 feet in 6 weeks. you recall that. So in 2019, we're in our third and fourth year. You just heard Assistant Superintendent. She is starting her fourth year. I am in third and a half. Most of the leadership team have been here 3 to 5 years. So we're right in the continuation of growing the roots. All of the work that you're hearing about and seeing is the roots. We're growing them, strengthening them, to make sure that we have that solid foundation to support growth. And that was what 2019 was all about. That's what we were doing. Kristen Rex talked about the regional cooperative, so I'm not going to go back to that. She really articulated that beautifully, better than I could have. But I do want to remind you that our schools have been going through school improvement activities. We're in our second year of implementing curriculum. Last year, we did the English language arts. This year, we're doing the math. Next year, right now, we have a committee of teachers that are looking at science curriculum. We'll be selecting one. We'll be presenting to you, the board, for adoption, and then we'll implement in the next fall. So for our teachers in our 3 schools, this has been tremendous changes for them. And not just the curriculum, but it's also looking at benchmark data to inform instruction. What happens in the classrooms, that when they give the map test, and they get back the results, that they take the next step and really look at the results and did my student learn what they needed to learn? Yes, no. Then proceed with that. And if not, then what do I need to do to reteach? What are the strategies that I use? But in addition to working with our teachers to learn those skills, we have also decided that we need to have a more systematic approach. So last fall, we have implemented for the first time professional learning communities. You will be hearing more about that as we go down the road, but the professional learning community is really a systematic approach, a mechanism to provide formal support to our teachers in using data to inform instruction. We are putting in place language planning. Language planning really is, again, a very formal process of evaluating what an individual student or child needs, developing a language plan for language acquisition. We're implementing that. You've heard about the Braille curriculum. We have other curriculums that we are in the process of selection. For example, the life skills, we will be doing that next year as well. So teachers right now who teach life skills are looking at what's available out there, and will be selecting curriculum materials that they can use to support their teaching of life skills to certain students we have on campus. And I'm just touching upon these. There's just so much going on throughout the agency. And I know you've heard some of this before, but I want to remind you that these are the foundational work that we're doing within the agency here. The early learning program, this last July, we brought on Kendra Benedict, Dr. Kendra Benedict. She became the new early learning program director, and we combined the 0 to 3 programming with the 3 to 5 in an effort to smooth that transition from 3 to 4, from the home visits to the preschool, and then that transition at 5 to kindergarten. The goal is, obviously, that our young children will be ready for kindergarten, but having a systematic approach to support that process. And one of Dr. Benedict's first challenges was insufficient numbers of qualified preschool teachers. We had an unexpected, unpredicted growth in the number of our preschool students, both on the Tucson campus and the Phoenix campus, we had to look at teachers. Who do we have as teachers? And after the school starts, as you well know, it's almost impossible to hire teachers. So Dr. Benedict, a couple of months ago, really had to look at the 0 to 3 teachers and the caseload distribution, and then reassign the caseload distribution to free up a number of teachers to go into the preschools. And 2 of those teachers had just moved into the state of Arizona to work for 0 to 3. They weren't anticipating to be working as preschool teachers, but they have done so. They're now in our preschools. So that was one of the first challenging decisions that Dr. Benedict had to make in terms of making sure that we are providing high quality educational opportunities and support opportunities to our families and the young children. So I could go on, but I think what I'm going to do now is just sort of stop. You've heard most of this before. Looking ahead to 2020, what are we doing? Well, you heard a lot already from Dr. Rex, the assistant superintendent. Other things I want to highlight are we have decided to do a demographical analysis, a demographical study, try to predict enrollment of students into our programs over the next 3 to 5 years. Towards that end, we are now in the process of contracting with an external provider to do that demographical study with us. As I have more information, I will share with you. But my hope is with that data, then we can make better, more informed decisions in regards to our strategic planning. So that would just fold into the development of the strategic plan. So that leads me, 2020, you, the board, and the agency will be actively engaged in developing a strategic plan. Later in the agenda, we will be asking you to commit to almost monthly work study sessions to be working on the strategic plan. So that's 2019, the retrospective, some of the challenges for 2020. There are more challenges, but I think I'm going to pause for now. The one thing that I will add is that if you want to know more about ASDB, do what one of our external stakeholders did and read the agency profile. It's in there. I just reread it about 3-4 days ago to help me prepare for this presentation. It's all in here. Anyone who wants to know what ASDB is doing can read about it in the agency profile. It's here, all here. And that concludes my report to the board, with the exception of going into the executive session.
Okay, thank you, Superintendent Reichman. Do I have a motion to enter executive session?
This is Lynn Davison. I move that we go into executive session.
This is Suitcase Michael, I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Lynn, may you read the appropriate statement?
If I knew you, I'll call you.
He's got,
Oh, isn't it this one?
oh, these are the ones.
Yes. So it's going to be...
Pursuant to ARS 38-431.03A1, the Board of Directors may vote to go into executive session, which will not be open to the public, for the purposes of discussion and consideration of employment matters.
Thank you. Are we all back from executive session now? Okay, great. Now, excellent. Now we have left executive session, and we will move on to the consent agenda. 2.01, consent agenda item approval of consent agenda consistent with board policy to include items 3.01, 3.02, 5.02, 5.03, 5.04, 5.05, 5.06, 5.07, 5.08, 5.09, 5.10, 5.11, 6.01, 7.02, 7.04, and 7.05. Is there any discussion from the board who would like to remove any of these items from the consent agenda for further discussion later in the meeting? Hearing none, I will entertain motions to approve the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda. Lynn Davison.
It's Mike Manley, I second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay, great. The consent agenda is approved as written. We move on to agenda 3.03, information and discussion item, potential agreement between ASTB and ADE. And for this part, I will entertain a motion to enter executive session for purposes of obtaining legal advice.
This is Mike Manley. Can I just let the board know that I need to recuse myself from this discussion since it's directly related to my day job?
Yes, thank you for letting everyone know. You can still vote to go into executive session. Do I have any motions to go into executive session to discuss this agenda item?
Lynn Davison, I move to go into executive session.
This is UK, I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Thank you. Lynn, may you read the appropriate statement?
Pursuant to ARS 38-43.03A3, the board may vote to go into executive session, which will not be open to the public for discussion or consultation for legal advice with the board's attorneys.
And it's also actually 8.2 as well, because it's both.
Pursuant, the second one? This one?
8.2.
Pursuant to ARS 38-431.03A2, the board may vote to go into executive session, which will not be open to the public for discussion or consideration of records exempt by law from public inspection, including the receipt and discussion of information or testimony that is specifically required to be maintained as confidential by state or federal law.
Right, those would be our alternative bases. All right, thank you.
Hey, hi, this is Shelley here. I'm back.
Hi, Shelley. This is David. We have maybe one more minute in our break, unless everyone's ready. Okay, I see 5:40 now. So we are back, and we are going to move to item 4.01, information item finance report. Shana Cooper.
Shana Cooper, Executive Director of Business Services. Good afternoon, Board President Nigro, Superintendent Reichman, Assistant Superintendent Rex, members of the board, and ASDB community. Provided to each of you is a consolidated version of the financial reports for the month end and quarter end as of December 31, 2019, and for comparative purposes, the reports also show data as of December 31, 2018. Due to scheduling conflicts, we did not have a Finance Committee meeting in January. However, we are planning to meet in February to review the information thus far. I do have one informational item that was not included in my report, as the information was just published last week from the state's Joint Legislative Budget Committee. The fiscal year 2021 baseline book was published last Friday, and it shows an estimated increase in our appropriated funds of about a little less than $40,000. The increase is due to an anticipated growth in revenues within our Schools for the Deaf and the Blind Fund. Please note that the baseline provides an estimate of the state's general fund balances and does not actually represent a budget proposal. The approved fiscal year 2021 appropriation report will be published by the Joint Legislative Budget Committee in June, and at the July board meeting, I expect to provide any updates to our appropriations. Continuing on to the actual report, as referenced on page 1, as of January 1, 2020, there were 519.54 filled full-time equivalents and 106 vacant positions. The vacancies included several positions, including teachers, instructional assistants, residential service assistants, interpreters, bus drivers, and 27 various other positions. Within the 27 various other positions, Business Services is down to one current vacant position, and that's the assistant controller. I do expect to conduct interviews within the next 2 weeks, and hopefully we will be able to identify the candidate. So that means Business Services should be fully staffed at that point, and I will be able to get the help to help me with my day-to-day actual role that I currently have. So as of January 1, 2020, we had 2,133 students, and as of January 1, 2019, there were 2,056 students, so a little difference of about 77. On the bottom of page 1 and on page 2, you will see that the increase in our students when comparing both school years is within our birth to age 3 children, where it was 456 this year and then 413 last year. And preschool students now is 231, whereas it was 178 back in 2018. As of January 1, 2019, there is a decline in our site-based school enrollment on the Tucson campus and the regional cooperative students. Although the overall decline in the regional cooperative student enrollment, you'll notice there is an increase in the DVR regional cooperative and a decrease within the NCR regional cooperative. Page 3 actually begins the financial summary comparing current year to prior year data. Collected revenues thus far as of December 31, 2019 was $12.8 million compared to $4.5 million last year. So an increase of about $8.3 million, and that actually relates to the delay in receiving the November 2018 voucher revenues, whereas this year the November voucher payment was actually collected in December. Expenditures have increased from last year to this year by about $1.5 million. And the increase in expenditures is really due to the increase in equipment and total payroll, as well as professional and outside services. Pages 5 through 8 show the fiscal data in various formats and visuals, more specifically by fund source and by program. And then on page 9 actually shows you the budget status report showing actual revenues and expenditures comparison to the agency's budget. On that report, you will see, as of December 31, 2019, a $392,000 deficit. And what that means is our total revenues of $25.4 million compared to the $25.8 million in actual expenditures. The end of the second quarter has actually occurred, so I provided to you the balance sheet, the income statement, as well as the statement of cash flows as of December 31, 2019, compared to where we were December 31, 2018. Based on all of the review of the financial data thus far, I do not have any material concerns that I need to share with the board. Now that we have completed the second quarter, we're beginning to plan out and project for the third and fourth quarter. So the staff and I will begin to meet with the various departments to start forecasting out where we are at the end of the year. And we will also, starting in March, begin meeting with the departments to begin planning for the 2021 budget as well. So starting a lot earlier than where we were last year. If there are no questions, that really concludes the report for business services.
Excellent. Thank you. Does anyone on the board have any comments on the financial report? Thank you again. I quite enjoyed it. And moving on to the next item, 5.01, consideration and possible action of the November 15th, 2019 email from Sarah Laird to the board regarding policy G1900. I will now entertain a motion to go into executive session.
I make a motion that we go into executive session.
Do we have a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay. You can read the appropriate statements of the legal advice one.
Pursuant to ARS 38-431.03A3, the board may vote to go into executive session, which will not be open to the public, for discussion or consultation for legal advice for the board's attorney, from the board's attorneys.
Thank you. It'll just be the board in executive session. The superintendent will not be joining us. All right, is everyone back? Folks on the phone?
Yeah, this is Dean, I'm back.
Okay. Mark? Excellent, thank you. We are back in public session now. I move that the board direct its attorneys to proceed as discussed in executive session.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Thank you. Next item is going to be action item 6.02, action item use of state trust land right-of-way application. Terry Pritchard.
Good evening, Board President Nigro, members of the board, Superintendent Reichman, Assistant Superintendent Rex. My name is Terry Pritchard. I'm the Executive Director of Operations. I've been asked to give a brief overview on the State Land Trust. So where did the trust land come from? An act of Congress in 1863 established the territory of Arizona. Through this act, Congress granted sections of land from each township in the territory for the benefit of common schools. The endowment of public land for educational purposes was a practice established by the Northwest Ordinance in 1787. Basically, Congress realized the value of land and the importance of public schools to a developing nation. Through the State Enabling Act of 1910, the territory of Arizona was allowed to prepare for statehood. Excuse me. Additional trust land was assigned to the Common Schools Trust, as well as 100,000 acres was appropriated to ASDB. The creation of the State Land Department and the system by which trust lands are to be managed was established in 1915 by the State Land Code, which in compliance with the Enabling Act gave the department authority as trustee over the trust lands and their natural resources. Excuse me. Over the years, several 100,000 acres of grazing land, grazing trust land, became urban land as Phoenix, Tucson, and other cities expanded. In 1981, the Urban Lands Act enabled the trust to capitalize on lease large increases from Planning and Zoning Act of raw materials and land. Today, the Land Department's urban land sales and leasing program is the largest revenue producer of the trust. 87% of the trust lands are in the Common School Trust, which receives approximately 90% of the trust revenue. ASDB is one of 14 beneficiaries of the Common School Trust, as well as that owns trust for land that they have from 1910. This is why we get the applications, because due to ARS 15-1304, it gives our board the authority to basically have a majority approval for the land, the trust land, to be sold or applications granted. So attached, you have two applications for your review and approval.
Okay. Thanks for that update. I know sometimes we put these on the consent agenda, and there may be some confusion about what these are or what we're approving. So in the one under 6.02, this is I believe an easement or a right-of-way, I'm sorry.
Right-of-way, yes.
So to that effect, I would move that we approve this request. Do we have any seconds on that?
I second. This is Lynn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. That one has passed. We can move on to 6.03, sale of state trust land purchase application 53120477. Mr. Pritchard, this is a similar one we've had in our board packet. Unless there's any discussion on this, I would like to move that we adopt this one as well as presented. Do I have a second?
This is Lynn, I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. All right, thank you. We'll. Thank you, Mark. We'll sign this and have this back to you after the meeting. 7.01 we've already conducted, and then we move on to 7.03, discussion and action items, strategic plan development schedule for 2020. For this plan, you have in our board documents proposed dates, so we're proposing that we have work sessions on primarily the months that we do not have board meetings, and kind of skipping the summer a bit. I understand that, again, as we mentioned at the top of the meeting, there are 3 open board seats that are up for appointment and or reappointment, so we may have between 1 and 3 new board members by next meeting in March, so whatever we decide today will be subject to change, but nonetheless, we're here today. So if anyone has any, hopefully you had time to consider these dates and consider your availability. I'd like to have as many people as possible at these events. I think it's an important initiative for this year. So if anyone has any issues with those dates, please let me know.
I have,
Okay.
for 2 of the work sessions, the February 13th and March 19th, I've already been scheduled to be out of town.
And March 19th.
March 19th, spring break.
Does anyone else have any other issues with these dates that they know of right now? I understand other things come up as the year progresses.
I have the same conflict.
The same conflicts, Mark? Okay.
Yeah. Short notice for these times.
Yeah. Yeah. Same. And you have the same? Okay. Are there since we'll have 3 that have potential conflicts for February, March, are there alternatives that you might suggest?
Usually we do a doodle poll or something like that to figure out.
Okay. We can do that. Does that make sense for everyone? Okay. So let's do this then. And it's, again, we're just talking about the February and March dates, correct?
Mm-hmm.
At this point? All right, so,
For me.
okay, and it seems like for Mike and for Mark as well. So let's do this then. If we can entertain a motion to approve this meeting schedule with the deletion of the February 13th meeting and the March 19th meeting, subject to a mutually agreeable date that we will set at a later time. And of course, we'll publish that to the public as soon as we get that date, but hopefully in the next couple of weeks we'll be able to do that. Can I entertain such a motion?
Go for it, Mike.
Okay, do I have a second?
Lynn, second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the ayes have it, so we will do that, and Letitia, if you could send out a doodle for us, and we'll find replacement times, and then we can get that on the calendar and put it on the website.
So they're all okay except February,
Except
March.
for-
Except for February and March, right, that's what we just passed, so, and again, things can change in the future, but for now. Okay, thank you. So for the next agenda item, 8.01, call to the public for non-agendized items. Similar rules to earlier in the evening. Each member of the public will have 3 minutes. The first one is Polly Brady Garcia.
She left.
Is she here? She left? Okay, she left. The second is Danny Lawrence.
Thank you all for the opportunity. Before I start, I know this counts for my time, but I just wanted to have a reality check for you about something I saw here tonight. I know it was just a slide, but it was also an analogy spoken about here this evening. And I just want to say that there's nothing Disneyland-like about my son's education or his future. No mom does this for 14 months and drives thousands of miles to get your help because I find anything fantasy, fairy tale-like about my son's education. So I would gladly volunteer for your committee to bring needed stakeholder attention to that committee. This evening, I wanted to express my growing concern about the implementation of the Remote Education Pilot Program. In 2012, the last audit conducted by the Auditor General's Office specifically called for the creation of a remote education program. 7 years later, it's great to see some movement here, but please understand that another audit is due in the next 2 years, if not sooner. In that report, I have emailed all of you this evening. The evidence is provided, and the agencies who have found success are mentioned. There is no need to reinvent the wheel, only to study what's been available to you. It's worth mentioning that that same audit report suggests sunsetting this institution if continued failures aren't addressed and AZ merit outcomes continue to decline. As a board approaching your next strategic planning, I believe that the rollout of this program will be the most important legacy that you leave behind. Not only is virtual education a cost savings to the organization, but in my experience with our itinerant teachers up north, it's conducive to employee retention as well. It's also important to acknowledge that many of the funds given to ASCB through federal and state grants are achieved for the purposes of statewide services, and this program would help to deliver that equity. There are some really important pieces that I'm not hearing about as a consumer of those services, and I was hoping as a board you could help in the forefront moving forward with your planning. First, in the budget submitted to the governor in the fall, I have found no additional dollar allocations made for this equipment needed for the pilot program. How do we create this type of change without money? Next, this type of education is only good if the professional development invested in it works. So what steps are being taken to help prepare these teachers? Additionally, there needs to be measurements and metrics to determine how successful this program is for each student's IEP so teams can make data-driven decisions. Please develop systems here. It's too important for the outcomes of those end results on those AZ merit scores that we all need to see improve. Finally, there's no reason at this point not to be looking outside of this organization to see how this type of education has been executed with success in other states. I cannot stress enough how important the longevity of this institution relies heavily on how this program is implemented. So please take the time to make these changes with fidelity and thoughtfulness. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is, I believe, Donald Hazlitt. Is that correct? Am I saying that right? Ronald. I'm sorry. Ronald. Sorry about that.
Hello. Hello, Board President, Board members, Superintendent Reckman, Assistant Superintendent Rex. I'm an employee here, and I have decided to share some things with you. I did an assessment on time spent with students, comparing instructional aides and teachers. Teachers typically work a 40-hour week. Instructional aides typically work a 35-hour week. I noticed when it comes to students, they only work with teachers in their classrooms. Instructional aides help students access everything. They travel with their students to PE, attend lunch, are attending to students at recess, whereas teachers are focusing more on paperwork and planning. When you count how many hours are devoted to direct instruction to the classroom with their teachers, compared to how much the instructional aides are with the students, the majority of time is spent with the instructional aides, less than what is spent with the teachers. The 35 hours a week that instructional aides are on campus is spent with students, compared to only 20 hours a week with the teachers. I want to suggest how to figure out how to assist instructional aides getting raises because these teachers make much more than the instructional aides do. Even with 60 credits from a college or university, since that has been required, we have not gotten raises. The second item I wanted to point out was that when instructional aides come to class, a teacher may not even be on campus. A substitute may also not be available. But I have a certification, a substitute certification, but yet I've not been contacted to be a sub. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, those are all of the notes from the public. The next discussion item, 802, discussion item, agenda item for next regular board meeting, scheduled for March 5th, 2020 in Phoenix. Is there anything from the board that they'd like to have discussed at the next board meeting? Hearing none, we can move to agenda 9.01, meeting adjournment. I move that we adjourn the meeting. Sorry.
I second. This is Lynn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries. Thank you very much.